touch me just one more time, it thrills me. Now that I want it, now that I need it, yes, I may need it one more time, one more time. I whispered I love you and prostrated before you. Now I tell you I like you a lot, unravel cat's fur. I lived for the moment, it could blow over fastly. Now I'm planning my future, hopefully without blur. So come on, give me a sign and kiss me just one more time, it thrills me. Now that I want it, now that I need it, yes, I may need it one more time, one more time. Feel like having a try, taking a chance. I'll give you a call, and I can see through your heart. I like it with a touch of romance, deep myself, a passionate one. I used to want it all from the start. Bit by bit, a bit more, bit more. Just give me a bit more. Bit by bit, a bit more, bit more. Just give me a bit more. Bit by bit, a bit more, bit more. Just give me a bit more. Bit by bit, a bit more, bit more. Just give me a bit more. I get a touch of romance, a deep myself, a passionate one. I used to want it all from the start. Try taking a chance, I'll give you a call, yet I can see through your heart. Like it with a touch of romance, a deep myself, a passionate one. I used to want it all from the start. Bit by bit, bit more, bit more. Bit by bit, bit more. Bit by bit, bit more, bit more, bit more, bit more. Bit by bit, bit more, bit more, bit more, bit more. Bit feel like having a try, taking a chance. I'll give you a call, but I can see. Bit by bit, bit more, bit more. Bit by bit, bit more. Bit by bit, touch of romance, deep myself, a passionate one. I used to want it all from the start. Bit more, bit by bit, bit more, bit more, bit more, bit more. See, bit by bit, bit more, bit more, bit more, bit by bit, touch of romance, deep myself, a passionate one. I used to want it all from the start.
Testing. This is a test in English to check the audio level. Is the audio level correct? Can anyone hear me? This is interpretation. Testing. Okay, should I try in French? Est-ce que je devrais essayer en français? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Bonjour, bienvenue au
Good
dernier
day. Welcome to the last webinar for the month of February for the RQMO. I'm Ms. Ouellette, President, Scientific President of the RQMO. It's our last seminar, Zebra webinar with all sorts of guests that we welcome. And the last but not the least of our guests, this should be interesting to all the rare disease community about the strategic plan regarding rare disease in Quebec. So the diagnosis vagrancy, the Odyssey was our topic, the rare disease patients diagnosis Odyssey. So we have the iRare Center, which is a support center for rare diseases and non-diagnosed diseases also. We convey a lot of information, we disseminate information in regard to rare diseases, research, and orphan medication. And we raise the awareness of the population in general, the medical circle, and we advocate for research on rare diseases. In Quebec, if we use a statistic that's used a lot, from 6 to 8% of a population that would be impacted by a rare disease, this is about 700,000 people impacted by rare disease, about 500,000 children. And in terms of people without any diagnosis, eventually we say that there will be 40 to 50% of people without a diagnosis, from which some will receive their diagnosis tomorrow morning or maybe a year from now. But it may take some time, a while, years and years. For some, they will never get their diagnosis. We conducted a survey at the RQMO, which is quite similar to all the surveys that are conveyed around the world. Now, depending on those surveys, this could be 5 to 8 years, the time that it takes in average to obtain a diagnosis. 37% of our respondents said that it took them 3 years or more, 18% more than 10 years. 30% of our respondents said that they had consulted with several doctors in order to obtain a diagnosis. Usually, Indeed, you have to go see different specialists, doctors, before getting the right diagnosis. Up to 8,000 rare diseases. That's why the diagnosis can be extremely rare. Doctors cannot know all of those diseases. In most cases, they will never meet with those diseases throughout their career. But because of the diagnosis, the wanderings, medical wanderings, vagrancy, as we call it, there's a lot of uncertainty for people waiting for their diagnosis for their disease. It's trial and error for treatment often. Sometimes you have false positives or diagnoses and the mistreatment or wrong treatment also. And it's the genetic advice which is not there or not precise. So it's very hard to determine the level of risk for other members of the family, or in the case of pregnancy, for instance, it creates false hope situations when you go from one diagnosis to another one, uh, psychological distress, lack of access to services, and all sorts of problems are derived from this. This can be a long process, a long journey, because people are not believed in the medical world. People do not believe the symptoms. The symptomology that patients come up with, people think that it's psychosomatic. So these people that have a true disease, they may lose confidence in our medical system. There are solutions. Some countries have adopted some solutions, came up with something, and we wish for concrete actions here in Quebec. This was presented before the Minister of Health and Social Services. She's been working on this folder now because we're supposed to have a policy for this year for rare disease policy, a priority for patients, parents, families, and people that support the ill people. We have to train doctors in terms of the issue that these people face. What are their difficulties? What does their life look like, so that we can support them, especially if there's um, diagnosis wanderings, so that these doctors are better able to provide a diagnosis, so that they can provide better services. So for that, we need resources also. Resources must be made available to support doctors. They had their first plan, national plan in France for rare disease. Now, they have designed their third plan already for rare disease. They talked about the doubt culture, which is some attitude. It's a doubt attitude with doctors. And so the idea is that from that doubt, you get into doubting all the time and challenging the situation, so that you can suspect that there's a rare disease. We have to cultivate that approach so that in the culture, people doubt and challenge the situation. And so we can question the situation and not just say that it's psychosomatic. So with reasonable doubt, you can eventually suspect that there's rare disease. New sequencing technology now enables you to find a diagnosis, like for Tommy here, he's 14, and Tommy has been faced with a diagnosis. He has a disease which is showing up in a new way because it's linked with a gene. And but it's in the framework of the research that we can find those diagnoses. So it would be great to expand this at a clinical level. And so many of these people, for years, we have some testimonials from people for 30, 40 years, they've been looking for a diagnosis. And so they've been wandering around and they have no diagnosis. It's not well known for our health system. So that's why these people cannot get the right diagnosis. So the plan that will be submitted in order to help find the right diagnosis, and for also taking care of these people with the diseases. So thank you for our partners, because thanks to you, we can provide these webinars and activities, and there will be an activity Saturday. And so all sorts of activities happen. So I'd like to give the floor to our guest. I'll introduce our guest to start with. And during the presentation, I will, hold on, during the presentation, I will, well, you'll be able to insert your questions for the Q&A for English people, right? Q&A. At the bottom of your screen, you'll find that function. So we'll be able to consider your questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Béraud, for being here with us today. And he's CEO of Montreal InVivo. He has an experience for more than, can you hear me? I believe so, yes. Thank you. Okay. And more than 25 years of experience in the life science sector. He's got experience in marketing and business development. Also, he worked in the clinical diagnosis field, playing that part, in charge of business development also for a small and medium-sized company in biotechnology, worked also in a technological transfer organization. He worked for political and strategic development for an industrial association in the life sciences sector. That was before joining Montreal InVivo. And during his free time, he's a volunteer for the board of directors of an organization which is called HPC for Humanity, which aims at making university researchers available. And so they will use refurbished computers and use all that calculating power for a cause. So welcome. We've met at a biotechnology company in the field of genomics some time ago. It was a while we met, and we're pleased to welcome you here today. So I'd like to give you the floor now. Thank you, Gail. It's been indeed a few years that we know each other. We've known each other through biotech, and we worked with some organizations that already were involved in genomics, and it's related somehow to rare disease also. But hello, and thank you, and thank you to the community for welcoming myself today. At Montreal InVivo, we do some work in the context of rare disease policy for Quebec. And so I'll make a presentation in regards to that reality. I'll start with an overview of the life sciences sector. Montreal InVivo has been working in this sector for about 15 years now. You know this sector without knowing it, really. You have to know that it's about comprised of 700 organizations throughout Quebec. And in that, you will find a lot of companies, small and bigger companies, and also research centers, universities, hospital centers, which develop new technologies in the field for human health mainly. So many companies, many people also work there, because we're talking about 37,000 people that work directly in those companies. And we may add about on that 11,000 people on top of that working in public research. Life sciences sector, we've talked a lot about that during the COVID pandemic time. We've talked a lot about pharmaceutical company because we know them better. But this sector gathers different organizations, biotech companies. We have a beautiful one in Quebec, Medicago. They've just received their approval for their COVID-19 vaccine from Health Canada. This is a biotech company from Quebec, Medicago. You have health tech companies also, which are more about medical procedures, imaging, prosthesis, and so on. And digital health companies also, including everything that's about AI applied in the field of health, and organizations, companies which are supporting the industry, like contractual research companies or manufacturing companies that manufacture different products that are being developed. This is a very important sector for Quebec, and in which we can be proud to say that we set ourselves apart here in Quebec and Montreal in that field. So Montreal InVivo, who are we? Not-for-profit organization. We want to further economic development. Our work, we want to make sure that the life sciences sector in the greater Montreal region fosters growth as much as possible in terms of competitiveness for the development of organizations that comprise what we call this cluster. That's the technical name for it. It's a cluster, but it's a group or a network of companies comprised of researchers and partners also in the field. Our work is there. We work with different segments in the sector. We want to make sure that we have all the tools readily available so that our organizations can develop. Montreal InVivo, it's like the oasis in the desert, or it's the place where everybody goes. In the savannah, there's one point where everybody goes to drink, elephants, tigers, whatever. Everybody goes to the same pond to drink in Africa, the savannah, whatever. It's a metaphor, but we are a center, we're a nexus, and all the different actors, stakeholders come to this center. And so researchers, organizations, company, and also health facilities, all the stakeholders get together there and develop relationships and mobilize so as to develop the life sciences ecosystem in Montreal. So we further economic development, but what do we do concretely? We put together projects, we create structuring projects for our ecosystem. All these projects are collaborative because we work with the different stakeholders in the sector, from the sector. Simple examples here. The development, the entrepreneurship and life sciences development program, number one. Young entrepreneurs said we need some support because we want to avoid having to make the basic mistakes. So most entrepreneurs are scientists who want to start up a business, but they don't have that experience. So we train them for that. We support them, we give them a curriculum, and over a year, they come for a week or for a month, whatever. They come and we provide them with tools so that they can become better entrepreneurs. And so they can base themselves on their scientific training. Or once they launch the business, we link them with savvy entrepreneurs. This is a mentorship program towards success so that they can avoid making mistakes and they can talk to somebody they can trust. We create the significant events from the 10th to the 12th of May of this year. This will happen at the Bon Secours market or marché. We'll have this activity, and we have projects for equity, diversity, inclusion. In order to be more effective in terms of inclusion, including people in terms of fairness or equity, diversity, and so on, and inclusion. That's the EDI. Some very important pillars here: development, how organizations and businesses can converge here. Labor is one of our issues, raising the awareness of citizenship and the population in general regarding the innovation impacts. That's what I do today. We want to explain what you do and why it's important, life sciences. And we want to make sure so that innovations that are developed in the sector can be reaching concretely doctors so that they can treat patients well. This is a must. And we want to make sure that the sector is perceived as being a must for the economic recovery at the post-pandemic level in Quebec. So what brings us to address rare diseases here? Why am I here? In 2019, there was the Quebec Task Force on Rare Diseases launched by the Department of Health and Social Services, the MSSS. So at InVivo, we created a committee for the specialized projects on rare diseases because we wanted to hear the different actors of the ecosystem, and we wanted to create a link with their voice and whatever the department was doing or wanted to do. And we try to gather people from different horizons or with different backgrounds or profiles so as to have the most thorough, most holistic overview or view on the situation. That's what we did with the project committee, and which objectives were clear. To ask questions about what can we foster, create so that patients have a faster access to therapeutical and diagnosis initiatives or resources that are developed in the sector. Concurrently, this increase the competitiveness of our life sciences sector in the field of rare diseases. We're not going to reinvent the wheel or work in a compartmentalized way. We will get our inspiration from the best practices at the international level. The committee is comprised of the following people, but I'm not going to state every name. And with the host, we've been aware of this. This is a multidisciplinary approach with people from the industry, big pharma or small companies, biotech companies, and so on, in terms of medical initiatives. We have clinicians, doctors that comprise this project committee. And so you see the members, and we have recommendations from the Department of Economy and Innovation and the Department of Health and some other organizations. So we collaborate here with those people. You see the members. So we have a diversity of points of view, of input, which means that whatever we propose, I believe, has great value for the department and the Quebec population in general. Before doing a project, we start studying things so that we can understand what the situation is. We can take stock of the situation at time zero. When we start and launch a project in 2020, we created a compendium of companies that are part of the rare disease sector. Do we have a critical mass here for such companies? Yes. Some have become even flagships. They were purchased by big international corporations for a couple of billion of dollars. There was one, and for instance, and so on. We've reached critical mass in that field with companies. And what about our researchers? Do we have researchers in the field of rare disease? In 2020, we conducted a biometric study, which is a comparative study on public research in the field of rare diseases for Quebec and Canada. So we wanted to assess the degree of competitiveness. So sometimes when we write in an article, we want to refer to other research conducted by other researchers, but our Quebec researchers are quoted a lot in the literature internationally, which means that we have great skills in terms of rare diseases in Quebec. In terms of public policies, we wanted to conduct also a comparative study in order to take stock of the situation in regards to rare diseases. This was conducted in 2021 with this comparative study. We may not be the best. We're not the last either in that field, but even though we're not leaders at that level, it gives us an idea about what we should do in terms of rare diseases. All of this led us to create a strategic action plan for rare diseases, which is comprised of the different recommendations regarding the different issues that have been identified by the committee. The plan, I don't want to show all the details of it. We don't have the time. It's not finished anyway, but if we had a bit of time left, maybe we could consider some of your feedback, get some of your ideas. For the stakeholders around the table that decided to work together on this very item, these are people that are very committed with the government of Quebec. They are engaged so that we can design a rare disease policy which makes sense so that we can make fast improvement for patients living with rare diseases and the community and the different institutions and stakeholders. That's the role of the strategic approach. How should we consider the issues? We've divided things in 4 categories, the main challenges. Number 1, the care offer or supply for patients. There's a lack of equity or fairness in terms of service access in Quebec. The training of professionals is not the same everywhere. Not all professionals are trained equal. So it's very important to mention what Gail has said earlier and the point of view of RQMO. We've received the same messages, webinars and trainings, and the problem with the lack of diagnosis, what we call the diagnosis vagrancy or wonderings, when people don't know what their diagnosis is. Early testing also, because we want to find the right treatment as early as possible. Sometimes the screening or testing is done too late. In terms of funding, it's research funding mainly, because the research field is not very well funded compared with other research fields, especially when we look at COVID-19 right now. This is one of the most funded research elements. Cardiovascular diseases, sciences, or oncology. If we compare with that, we can say, and people say that there's lack of funding for rare disease research and considerations. Also, Quebec is a great territory. It's vast, and patients are everywhere. And it's very costly to conduct rare disease studies because of that, because the population is spread out. We should improve that. And there's no registry on rare disease health conditions. Even at the RAMQ, it's not good enough. So if we don't have the right data, and if it's not reliable, how can we talk about what we're talking without any data? It complexifies things and makes things harder for rare disease research. We've talked about capacity to pay also, being able to pay. How do we fund a new treatment? There are concerns about that. Treatments can be rare and costly. And so it's not just budgetary, but for instance, insurance coverage for medication that's not covered by the RAMQ. In terms of fairness, there's lack of access to treatment for patients in Quebec. Again, last category of issues, this is related to the business development. We're not very competitive compared with other countries. There are no incentive in Quebec really to develop innovations in the field of rare diseases, adding also the fact that the approval delays are too long in Quebec and Canada. So in terms of access, once the product is approved, it takes a while before it's accessible to the health professional and to the patient who's already in bed at the hospital. So we need to improve things in terms of improvements that is required. We should do that. These are the main concerns or challenges that have been identified. We've said also that it's time to act. It's happening now. The right time is now in terms of opportunities. We need to concretely act now so that rare disease patients can really have access to care supply or offer that's the same as for common disease patients. So that's why we created our strategic plan in view of all that with the project committee. We've designed this. It's based on the experience of the members comprising this committee. These people are field people. They know what they're talking about, and they are inspired by the best practices at the international level. We have 5 main topics for action here. I won't give you all the details about these action levels, but you'll have an idea at least of what's included in terms of action. The diagnosis must be given faster for genomic testing, sequencing, the update of the biometric screening test, and so on. We need to fast track this. Taking care of patients, this must be improved. More skills, more care, more resources in the regions, also training professionals in the field of health. We've talked about that. Health professionals, we cannot expect them to be trained in regards to all the 8,000, whatever rare diseases, but they should at least have a certain methodology. The doubt culture is very interesting, or when you suspect that there might be a rare disease, as opposed to telling people that they're just having a psychosomatic issue. Thirdly, health data. We need to group them and centralize them, all the data. The idea is to be as to offer the optimal information. We're talking about research opportunities and so on. We need a registry, and we need to have access to the registry on rare diseases so that we can develop new innovative tools, or develop new diagnosis, or develop new ways to look at this. Fourthly, innovation development. Montreal InVivo, this is really what we want to focus on the most for our work, funding research for rare diseases, supporting small and medium-sized enterprises also, those that are innovating, that develop rare disease solutions. Number 5, related to number 4, attracting more clinical studies. It's very important to have such studies for rare diseases in Quebec. It's the only way for a patient to have access to new therapies, which are still at the development and validation phase. It's important to be attractive. We need to be attractive at the international level. Recommendations revolve around incentives and attractiveness, financial incentives to attract people here in Quebec. Number 6, access to treatments that are proven. Improving that, recommendations are about the assessment process for new treatment and how it's going to be reimbursed by the private and public plans. And I've mentioned this in terms of issue. This is too long. It should be faster. As soon as a treatment is approved by Health Canada, things should go fast. It should be readily available. And then we'll deal with whatever we have to do in order to reimburse things. And the last one, this may not be the first priority for RQMO and the community, but it's in regards to funding. There's a big federal investment or funding in terms of rare disease. There's a willingness to better support the development or design of options for rare disease, but we need to find most of the money that's available in Quebec in order to really fund and support our initiatives here for the development of innovative treatments. So we have some recommendations here. This is the creation of a public and private fund, a joint public-private fund that's focusing on those priorities. So I don't have more time. That's what the committee has considered now. Success prerequisites. I'll finish on that. It's great to have a document like that, but if we don't want things to be shelved endlessly, we have to wonder, how do we measure success? The government of Quebec and the health department, how can they develop a national plan for rare diseases? We need a dialogue. We need to collaborate. We need to stop thinking only in terms of Quebec, Quebec, Quebec. We have to start looking towards other provinces and the federal government. There are different stakeholders in the rare disease ecosystem. How can we make sure that all these people work together? And that's how we'll get some resources in order to further the development of a rare disease plan in Quebec, in Ontario, in BC. That if we can pool resources, if we can put them together, that's how we can increase the odds of being successful. We should not reinvent the wheel and should copy best international practices. It makes sense, right? But the regulatory framework, it needs to be very visible and consistent at a provincial and federal levels. This is also a very important factor towards success. The funding topic also, we need to find new funding ways for research, innovation, and the therapeutic and diagnosis options regarding rare diseases so that we can be more competitive in our very ecosystem. I'd like to stop here. Thank you for listening. If you have questions, if you have comments, I'll be pleased to consider them. I'd like to use my slide here again with the 7 topics. I would like to hear you here. I'd like to consider suggestions here. Are there any quick wins? Things that we might be able to identify here, things that we could implement, low-hanging fruits. Maybe we want to start running with quick victories, and from there on we can build it up. And so anyway, that's it. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Frank, for your presentation for Montreal InVivo, because a lot of people in the rare disease community, they should know better and know that you exist. And that's what I meant. Thank you to Montreal InVivo. Thank you for this initiative. Thank you for inviting the RQMO and other patient associations. Thank you for inviting actors, stakeholders to participate. Because as you said, all the life sciences stakeholders that are concerned by rare diseases should all start working, getting aligned on the development of a single policy. Thank you so much for your listening. In terms of rare diseases, often people think about research, clinical trials, and basic research, theoretical research, but you've created a link with the clinical side of things to fast track diagnosis considerations, to improve the resources that are provided for in order to be better able to take care of patients. And so you've and raising the awareness and the training of professionals in the field of health. This is very important so that we can provide diagnoses faster and we can better take care of patients. Number 2 and 3, this was about advocating, fostering research and treatment access. This complies with the priorities that we've already understood through our surveys, and it's quite there, indeed, considered. We have a question here. As you know, there's an advisory committee for rare diseases in Quebec. They've been working, and in January, great news, at last, the patient associations have been consulted with by that committee, and they are currently writing a policy, and someone is asking, when can your report be conveyed, when and how? This is a very good question. The report is being almost finished. I mean, it should be finished in a couple of weeks. At the health department, we have to meet with the people that are in charge of writing this policy, and so that we could present them with our recommendations and results. I don't know if they'll want to meet us at the department, but no matter what, in March, at the end of March, maybe in mid-March, they will receive the final version of the document, final draft. We want to attend there and be there in person, but may not be possible. But anyway, we'll submit that and give that to them. I don't see why they wouldn't want to welcome you. I have no control over that. This is an important group for the life sciences ecosystem, as you've called it. And of course, you have to consider MEI, the Economy and Innovation Department. You mind saying a few words about that? For more than a year, there's been a reform, life sciences, innovation research. There was the chief scientist was consulted with in fall also. What's around the corner in terms of life sciences for Quebec? Well said, Gail. A lot of recommendations and topics call upon the health department directly. And there's also the MEI department, which is in charge of research also, and all specific questions related to the life sciences sector. So they're on our short list of people that we want to talk to. But specifically to answer your question, I'll go backwards a bit. In 2017, the Department of Economy has published, after a process that had engaged a lot the life sciences sector, a strategy, a Quebec strategy for life sciences. It's a strategy for 10 years. It was welcome positively, and some funding for 5 years. Now, this is the fifth year, and so they want to update that Quebec life sciences strategy in order to obtain the necessary funding for the 5 next years. This was the opportunity that was born, and it happened at a crossroads when the pandemic situation hit. Nobody thought about COVID-19. Nobody had it on their radar. So this new version of the strategy in Quebec for life sciences will be published around the month of May, about that, April or May of this year. We're expecting for some things that we advocate to be addressed or considered, at least in the life sciences, the Quebec life sciences strategy. So we don't have any certainty about that, no control over that. But of course, we'll do everything that needs to be done in the process for that. I've talked about the chief person, but there's a Quebec strategy for research and innovation also. It's not specific about life sciences or health, but it's for all the sectors. And there, a few things will be related to life sciences also, and we hope to be able to benefit from that for research and innovation in terms of rare diseases. We knock on wood. A lot of great initiatives. If you have any questions, do not hesitate. Gail, I have a question for you. Quick wins again. Can you, Gail, identify some quick victories that we may be able to put forward? For such a process, it's important for us because it motivates everyone. And then we can say, you know what, this is not a 25-year plan. It's for 6 months, 1 year. We can implement this. And so if we can do it, it will make a big difference for the patients and for the rare disease community. Do you have any ideas? I can take some notes. It's been more than a year now that we've been telling the department about what we think. And what we think is what patients, parents told us, and family health providers. And so there are thousands of people that get in touch with us. They want to get information and support. Every year, there are the same topics that come back. So since, or for a year, we've come up with a plan for that reason, so that we don't want to hear the general statement. We don't want the government to talk about a big plan. We want to see immediate, quick wins, as you say, immediate action, immediate success. We want to see that. Early victories, quick victories. In terms of the diagnosis, vagrancy, or wanderings issue, it's the same thing. If you want to better take care of patients, you need to get a training. It's even an awareness. Why? We have a zebra as a metaphor, because we, in our health system, we're not thinking about horses. We're talking about zebras, because our health system is not, does not provide a specific care for rare diseases. As you said, there are 7,000 or more rare diseases, but there are so many different specifics about what people with rare diseases go through in terms of diagnosis vagrancy. There's also support and specificities. People need specific support when there's diagnosis vagrancy, the lack of standardization of practices regarding practice guidelines. Even genetic tests are not standardized in our province. That's the key. We believe that this could be done very quickly. It's through the medicine faculties. Maybe not. Why not now? Why not start now with this work? And having a plan for that would be easy. 6 months from now, maybe maximum 1 year, and then we could start. And of course, I think we would need to have a partnership with the rare disease people or community and associations. For us, this is immediate. The diagnosis approach should be taught at large, not just to our specialists, doctors, uh, genetic experts, and so on, but this should be taught more. There's resources also. For our rare center, we've created a compendium of experts for certain rare diseases. We have a compendium of specialized clinics in Quebec for the project, but this should be available to all urgentologists and doctors and so on. They don't know what to do with a rare disease patient. They don't know where to refer the person or what to do about this. Doctors need resources. They need to know where to go and how to do things. These are our two main requests, which are very concrete. This could be done fast, and this quickly could change the trajectory of care. So in order to get a diagnosis or for better care of patients. Regarding the registry, there are specific diseases, of course, and respective associations, but for us, these considerations are a must. These actions are related to raising the awareness, firstly, and when doctors are initially trained, it could be done there. And how could we include an awareness raising or basic training about the diagnosis process that doctors should be trained with if ever they have to face a rare disease situation? And last Saturday, we've talked about something, and I want to take advantage of this time to talk about this, but I had a lot of questions. But we did the Zebinaire, which was an original idea. This was never done before, to our knowledge. It's like an old show which was called in Canada Scholars for Dollars, or Génie en Herbe in the French version. This involves usually students, and there's a quiz, and questions are asked to these students to see who's the genius. But likewise, there was a quiz with questions for doctors. And so we realized that they didn't know how many rare diseases exist. And so they didn't know about the problems related to vagrancy, diagnosis wanderings, and so on. And then there were some questions about some diseases. But because of the experience that many rare disease associations went through, we know that there's underdiagnosis. So there are certain characteristics that they could learn more about. And then there's another question, which is a hot topic, a tricky issue, and we have to talk about it. But a lot of people are referred to the psychiatric ward. They are deemed to be psychosomatic ill people, or they might be even considered to be crazy, or they think they may have harsher disorders because they're not believed. It's now a lot of patients still suffer from bias in our health sector because people don't believe them that they have disease, or they believe they're crazy, or so we see those statements from patients. We have to deconstruct certain beliefs, whatever we hear in the medical circles. So 150 questions had to be studied by students, and Saturday we had that competition. And so we we will be able to see the recordings. And they performed extremely well. They answered almost correctly to all questions. And there was a buzzer used for the last game to get the fastest answer as possible, to know who was the fastest. They studied, and at the end, they said that they had learned a lot through that um, game or quiz. This is a software. It's like a flashcard system through software, and you can use it. It's going to be made available. And the winners, and this is a scoop, it was a team of women students. Les Axons was the name of that group of women students that participated in this competition. The Laval University Medicine faculty students, Amada Mars, Pétrance, Émilie Lavoie, Charlotte Dupont, and Sandrine Roche. These are the names of the winners. They won a $2,000 scholarship. They'll be able to share that. Things went well. They thought that this was very fun. It looks like an activity that's very interesting to go to intervene quickly and early with students, medicine students. Yes, it's very interesting. And what can we do then about the doctors that are already practicing? Generalists, for the first line of intervention. Could we develop some awareness tools? Are there any things we could do over the phone, maybe with some apps and so on? So again, for general practitioners and so on, we've talked about the medicine students, but all the other ones, even specialist doctors, this is an approach. Even if you have specialists, these are the doctors that face the greatest amount of rare diseases. There's an approach that can better help patients. Continuing training, maybe for all other doctors, could be good. And indeed, we need to have tools and guidelines. And you said it earlier, why should we reinvent the wheel? France, they have already designed their third rare disease plans. And so 28 countries in the EU or nearby have their own plan. This was pretty much standardized throughout the EU. And so there are a lot of ideas there that we could definitely copy or get inspired by. I have a question or a comment. I went to the website of Montreal InVivo, invite people to go there. I was surprised to see the great number of biotech companies in the field of rare diseases. We're not in touch maybe with those this year. We want to do more knowledge transfer to convey information, and we could consider those companies. We knew some companies that developed some therapies, but we were surprised to see how many companies there were in the biotech field in Quebec. Therapies, diagnosis tools, biomarkers, and there's a plethora of things. Can you tell us more about it? We have different companies, but we have beautiful levels of success commercially. For companies in that field, money flows where there's ROI possibly. We could think that investing on a company for rare diseases, that it's going to be so niched that nobody's going to be interested in that. Quite on the contrary, what we've discovered in Quebec and elsewhere, but in Quebec, I'm proud of this, we saw companies that were bought back by bigger companies. One of the first one was Nodia, which was bought back and then bought back by AstraZeneca. I think this is a technology developed, invented, designed in Montreal, which was used afterwards. It was developed and it became a product. delivered onto the market. They purchased the company at $1 billion almost, which means that the investors that put money for starting up the company have obtained great ROI. Clemencia, the CEO of that company, she sold that company to Ipsen, another company. A lot of money then was created because pharmaceutical company paid a lot of money to acquire, to purchase that company, which means that there's a very viable business model for rare diseases. We're developing companies based on innovations designed here, but we can also create this Quebec expertise economically. It becomes the watchword then. And this was announced for funding, I think, yesterday. But anyway, in the field of rare diseases, what has been shown is that there's a path of commercialization towards profitability of investments that occur for these companies. Yes, this is not well known. We can be proud of that, though. In Montreal and Quebec, Montreal specifically, we have great companies in the field of rare diseases. A question about clinical trials in the field of rare diseases, because rare diseases are rare, even for Quebec or Canada. We're not a lot of inhabitants here compared with the United States and Europe. So, which means we don't have a big population for, it's not good enough for clinical trials. But at the neuromuscular level, we have great neurogeneticists, specialists in neurogenetics, but there aren't a lot of rare disease clinical trials. But you believe that there's a big initiative now with Catalyst, an organization that wants to foster the participation in clinical trials. The companies that you were talking about, the problem is that the investment for phase 3 for a clinical trial, they can do, or the preclinical phase 1, maybe phase 2, but that's pretty much it because it's too costly. How do you see that for the future of rare diseases regarding clinical trial? I think that, again, Catalyst is 100% aligned with this. The key is access to patients. In other terms, it's Catalyst, its work in general, it facilitates and starts up clinical trials faster for all therapeutical fields, but specifically also for rare diseases, because there aren't a lot of patients in Quebec, as you said. We need to identify those patients in view of the earlier recommendations. We've seen that the registry matter needs to be considered. The PL19, the new bill on field access, health field access, this will be debated in the upcoming months. I hope this will be adopted before the month of June. This will provide the tools at the legislative level in order to obtain more easily an idea of the patient so that they can participate in clinical trials. Then, one step further, we have to understand that we won't have enough patients in Quebec. We need to be able to do the same thing and work with other provinces throughout Canada and say, we have a pool of patients, so many patients in Canada, then we have enough people so that we can participate in an international clinical trial, because these are multicentric studies in different countries concurrently, but we want to make sure that part of that study, that part of it is conducted in Canada and Quebec. Then this is hope for patients because they can participate in a protocol for a phase 3 study, mainly a survey. So the molecule has reached its last steps, so it can be acknowledged officially by other authorities. So it's great to be able to participate in such clinical trials. Patients, when we talk about an early access to therapies, the clinical trial is one. If you participate in the conduct of studies like neonatal screening, for instance, so that you can identify babies as quickly as possible, neonatal or newborn screening, and so on. Thank you so much. There doesn't seem to be any other questions. And thank you so much. during the month of March. From what I understand, this document for Montreal InVivo, in collaboration with several stakeholders, will be published or launched in the month of March. We'll say the end of March, maybe. Maybe I was carried away a bit, but we need a bit of time because I just want to clarify something. Why am I saying that? For us, it's important to have everyone's feedback so that everybody can participate. We'll see the main recommendations and we can improve them, which means we need some time. And there's the spring break or now that's coming up. So for the end of March, well, let's say that we'll have it then, or anyway, we need a bit of time. Thank you so much. We need to have as many people as possible to provide their feedback, their point of view, and we need to introduce everything that encompasses these feedback, suggestions, and so on for the department, for the Department of Economy and Innovation, the MEI, for the community, the groups, the rare disease community, and so on. I hope this time we'll do it. Nobody will allow for someone dropping the ball on that, so should not fall in the cracks. So with the Facebook page, we'll convey information so that people will know what's happening in the field of rare diseases for Quebec, but a policy will be written. So we have hope this time in Quebec. We were told that, so it's positive in view of the policy to be written. That's it. Thank you. So this will be our last Zebinaire conferences for the Zebra month, le mois de Zébrier. And I'd like to mention that it's still time to register throughout the day. Saturday, you can still register. This is our educational day. And anyone then will be able to participate. We wish to have conversations with the rare community. So the people that are still faced with diagnosis of vagrancy, if you went through that, or a family doctor also that has faced that situation because his daughter faced the same problem without any diagnosis. Unfortunately, the diagnosis is not well known or misknown. So we need to talk about this in the future. How can we work so that doctors start thinking about rare disease patients? And also with a psychologist, we'll address the issue. How can we support people if they go through a period of time when they have no diagnosis? And Swanuke, Syndromes Without a Name, is an organization that helps people without a diagnosis in Great Britain. Isabelle Jordan, the president and co-founder of the Rare Disease Foundation, that went through a very long period of time without a diagnosis with her son. Anyway, great conferences that we've planned for you, and also great opportunities to discuss. So you'll find all the information for our future events and more on our website of the RQMO, rqmo.org. Thank you so much for joining us. See you soon.